But knowing in advance that there's this safety net all the way along, I think helps them come to the decision of, I'm going to the United States and nothing too terrible is going to happen to me. I'm going to have everything I need. I'm never going to go, me or my kids will go for want of diapers or formula or something material need. And that's, I guess, the issue with the United Nations and all these NGOs doing what they're doing.
Hey everyone, do you know that more than 5 million people have come to the United States illegally thanks to Joe Biden's open borders policies? Do you realize that 1.7 million known gotaways are in our nation? But do you actually know how this actually happens? How do people get from point A to point B? What and who are providing them the information that they need and the financial wherewithal to make their way to the United States? Because even if they save the money, even if they get it from family, they still need more, especially for transportation, for food, for all of the necessities to make it to the US. Where is all this money coming from? The horrible drug cartels, vicious and horrible and nefarious that they are a part of that, but they're being paid. Who else is helping the drug cartels move these people into the United States? Of course, you all know President Biden in the executive branch, but so are the non-governmental organizations, those that work with the United Nations, and they're using our tax dollars by the tune of hundreds of millions, even billions, to bring as many illegals to this nation as possible. And then they just fly and bust them all around the country. I'm going to take you inside all of this with a great investigative journalist and U.S. intelligence official. Yes, he's former. He used to work with Texas DPS and had access to classified documents and is a incredible journalist as well. And I remember him from many years ago, and he is still working. He's in Mexico. He's traveling all across the border, collecting information so that we know it. And he works for the Center for Immigration Studies. It's Todd Bensman. You do not want to miss this interview. If you didn't know how these immigrants are making their way in and who's manipulating them and who's bringing them here, then you do not want to miss this episode. I promise you, it will be more informative than anything you've ever heard before. I want to talk to you a little bit about fast-growing trees, though. And the reason I want to talk to you about that is because I know all of these subjects can be so heavy, right? We're talking about immigration. We're talking about the border. We're talking about our national security, America's security, our children's security. And sometimes that can just be overwhelming. What can you do to take a break from all of that? I'm telling you, you got to go to fastgrowingtrees.com. Fastgrowingtrees.com. I love this company. Why? Not just because it's a sponsor, but because I actually plant and I garden, and it gives me a great escape, like from, this horrors of news and the world and all of the confusion that we're feeling in the modern age. Sometimes we just got to get away from the television, get away from our cell phones, get away from work, take our families outside and just do some gardening. And that's what I do here in the beautiful state of Texas. I live in Region 8, and fastgrowingtrees.com actually helps me find the right plants and right trees for the area that I live in. And they are growing beautifully. Just look on my Instagram. You're going to see some videos there of my plants. It's absolutely beautiful. And right now with Fast Growing Trees, 30-day Alive and Thrive guarantee, everything will look great. Your yard will look great. Your home will look beautiful. And they come to you delivered right to your door, fresh out of the box. Join over 1.5 million happy Fast Growing Tree customers. Go to fastgrowingtrees.com/Carter now to get 15% off your entire order. Get 15% off fastgrowingtrees.com/Carter. That's fastgrowingtrees.com/Carter. I am so happy to have Todd Bensman on the show. He is a hero of mine. He is a senior national security fellow at the Center for Immigration Studies. You also served with Texas Department of Public Safety in their intelligence and counterterrorism division. Todd, I didn't know this. How did I not know this?
Well, I graduated from journalism to Intel. I had an offer I couldn't refuse to go do something really interesting in the Intel division. So I left journalism and I was over there for almost 10 years doing Intel for the state of Texas, almost all counterterrorism work. And counterterrorism work, a lot of it had to do with the border. So I was in the middle of all of that stuff, which is subject matter that I used to report on, and I know you did too. But it was really, let me just tell you that to get on the other side and get access to the classified materials, wow, it was mind blowing to actually get to see what it looked like from the inside of what I was reporting. You too, you were reporting on that special interest aliens back in those days.
Wasn't it crazy? And just so everybody out there, so y'all know, Todd and I both started early on. I mean, I've been covering the border for 20 years. I know you've been covering for how long, Todd?
Oh yeah,
I mean,
I've been in the business for 20 years in Texas. I mean, at
right,
least since 2006, I was on the border
right.
actively covering it.
So, yeah, so we were both on the border. We were both covering a very similar subject, special interest aliens. Those are people from countries that we would consider of special interest, people maybe connected with terrorism or countries connected to terrorism. And these would be people that we would not be able to vet properly, or we would want to apprehend because possibly we wouldn't know if they were connected to something nefarious. But I was so fascinated by Todd's work. When I started seeing your work, and because you were with Center for Immigration Studies and you still are, that was the first group, just to set up some background for our listeners, that gave me my very first Eugene Katz Award on covering the border. And I was just thrilled. I mean, my heart leapt. I worked so hard. I was at the Daily Bulletin, and the small to medium sized newspaper in California. And I couldn't believe that, my stories were making it all the way to Washington, D.C. But you and I were covering pretty much the same subject matter. Are you stunned at where this has come, at how bad it has gotten since we started covering the border?
Right. And when the funny thing about that is in those days, we were the crazy ones. Nobody was covering Middle Easterners crossing the border. That was considered crazy land, crazy time. But
They said we were conspiracy theorists.
Right.
I was called an alarmist. They came after me. Even when I was on CNN, they contacted CNN. I remember it from DHS and said, don't put her on Glenn Beck's show. That's when he was at CNN, because this isn't true. It's just a white paper. It's just a theory. And I was like, no, they're lying. It was a big battle,
Right.
a battle all the time.
And now the CBP's Customs and Border Protection .gov website publishes the monthly encounters with FBI terror watch listed immigrants, the very ones that everybody said for just years and years didn't exist.
Right. Well, it's scary because this is the thing. We have seen the media being manipulated. We have seen in recent time the media allowing itself to be manipulated, being part of the process of manipulating the public when it comes to Hunter Biden, when it comes to, President Biden, when it came to President Trump and the lies that were being told about him. But I remember 20 years back, just like you, having to fight not only Washington, D.C., but my colleagues. And I thought, if anyone is going to back me up, it's going to be the New York Times or the Post. I remember I was, a young journalist. I was out there. I couldn't believe what I was reporting because it was so incredible and so truthful. And I was talking to people at the highest levels of the Defense Intelligence Agency. I was talking to people in, SOCOM, in U.S. intelligence, in Mexico, in Western intelligence. And I was putting out these great stories that I thought, okay, these are going to change. And instead, conspiracy theorist, alarmist, right?
Oh, exactly. Now, I didn't go through what you went through in my reporting. I did a a 5-part series for Hearst newspapers on special interest aliens. In 2007, it won a National Press Club award. So I didn't go through that. But part of what I did go through is that everybody ignored my stories completely,
Right.
just like it never happened, because they were so thoroughly reported. You either had to pick it up and go with it and like have a new reality going forward about the border, or you would just ignore it, which is what happened. They ignored it. And then all the way up through just recent years, when Donald Trump would say, hey, there are terrorists crossing the border. Remember what happened when he said that? There were New York Times fact checks, written Washington Post fact checks. I mean, for probably 2 months straight, they were like, this guy's lying. None of that stuff is coming over the border. Remember, just a couple of years ago?
Yes, I do. And that was disinformation. And by the way, I did also at that point in time, because they didn't know who I was, and I wrote these whole series of stories called Beyond Borders and Here We Are Prisoners. And I did win the Sigma Delta Chi Award the same year that Christiane Amanpour won for Footsteps of Bin Laden. And I remember it was the same thing with me. Even though we were breaking these amazing stories, I was writing them from the perspective of Mexican citizens and going into Mexico as you are, which I'm going to talk to you about. You guys got to listen to this because he's in Mexico all the time. One of the few journalists from the United States that are reporting investigative pieces, facts that are real and tangible, and that the United States better pay attention to, at least our government better be paying attention to. But they were ignored. They were ignored. And your papers were extraordinary. But it doesn't surprise me, because what I have seen now, it just fits the bill. I've seen AP, Reuters, New York Post, New York Times, Washington Post, doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, finally, after, and never acknowledging that their own newspapers just a few years ago were calling it all a big bunch of fear-mongering lies meant to kind of stir up the population against open borders. I mean, anyway, let bygones be bygones. Truth eventually prevails is the lesson learned, I think.
You're absolutely right, Todd. Truth eventually prevails. And that's why I have you here on the Sara Carter Show, because you're the author of the book Overrun: How Joe Biden Unleashed the Greatest Border Crisis in U.S. History. That is absolutely a fact. I also have been speaking to people in Central America. I've spent a lot of time there over the last few years. And one of the biggest issues is the non-governmental organizations, folks out there, that's NGOs, that's their acronym. These are, groups that are supposed to be working as nonprofits, but they're pushing these migration policies according to the sources that I'm speaking with. Could you talk a little bit about the NGOs and how they're funded? And are you concerned about some of the NGOs actually working with and pushing for these migration policies?
Sure. I find the NGOs all along the migrant trails set up in way stations, supporting aid way stations all along the migrant routes from South America through Central America, all the countries there, and then into northern Mexico, all through southern Mexico and then northern Mexico. And these are non-governmental organizations, NGOs, that are often funded by the United Nations. I find that huge, I would say probably majority budgets of their budgets is provided by the United Nations, which in turn has their budgets substantially paid for by the American taxpayers. What they're doing is they're providing material aid and support and comfort, a social safety net, if you will, all along that southern corridor, leading from the cone of South America all the way to our border, hundreds of way stations. I was just talking last week to a nun from the Catholic diocese in Piedras Negras, And I asked her, and she runs a shelter in Piedras, which it's filled up with family groups that are all coming over the border. And just for kicks, I said, "Hey, can you name all the organizations that support you in your shelter here?" And I videotaped her saying, she just listed 6, 7 different ones. There were United Nations organizations, the International Red Cross. And I put it up on my Twitter account, but this is just like one tiny microcosm, one town, one shelter in one town. Uh, but recently I was able to find a budget document from the United Nations and from an organization that is like an umbrella organization for all hundreds and hundreds of NGOs. They're all listed in this document, 223 of them, and how much money they need and how much they were going to spend in 2023. And they were just going to give out cash, just cash handouts. They give them in debit cards all along the trail to the tune of $450 million in 2023 alone. And a similar
incredible. Where is the money coming from? Is it mostly funded by the United States and U.S. taxpayers?
Yes, it is. The majority of the UN's funding for refugees, resettlement and support and aid and all of that comes from the United States. It's very difficult, I'll point out, though, to track the money, because once it moves from U.S. State Department coffers or from other U.S. entities into the UN, it becomes less subject to Freedom of Information Act, because these are foreign-based organizations, and they're very opaque in their reporting about what money goes where, and it just moves and launders in a sort of an internecine. You lose it. Even certain congressional offices that are investigating this can't get to the bottom of how much money, U.S. tax money, is going where exactly. But we do know that most of it is U.S. tax money.
Well, I could tell you this, that when I was in Guatemala and I was speaking with President Giammattei, one of the issues, and I also spoke with President Jimmy Morales before he left office, one of the biggest issues they had was the money being put into NGOs in Guatemala. And they said that they wanted accountability for this money, that they needed to know what money was coming in from the United Nations into their country and where it was going. And it never happened, because even though they wanted it, the US and the UN folks fought the Guatemalan government on it, on accountability. And now, and tell me if I'm wrong, this is, you have the documents, and this is Catholic Charities. This is what has been documented, is that, and this is going back to 2010, there was like Catholic Charities had, and this is old, so there's new stuff out there right now, but they had revenues of 4.7 billion, 2.9 billion of which came from the United States government. I'm Catholic. I'm not going after it because they're Catholic. I'm just saying that they have billions of dollars. And this is just one charity that works with migrants, getting billions in taxpayer dollars for this.
Yes, it's very true. But why do we care? I mean, obviously, there's something big happening with big money and the migrants. And, I'm asked about, well, why should we care? And, my answer to that is that if you talk to the migrants, often about, what is their calculus for deciding to uproot their lives wherever they are, because contrary to what is said all the time, their lives are not that terrible. It's just that it's better over here.
Right. Or they are lured over here under these pretenses that they're going to have this amazing, new life. And a lot of times they get here and they're like, I've just been dumped on the streets. I have no idea where to go. I have a little bag in my hand and my kid. What am I supposed to do?
Streets are paved with gold is how they see it. And I mean, it's not that much different than if, I live in Austin, Texas, and somebody says, hey, there's a great job over here. You can make $100,000 a year more. I'm going to think about maybe going to Chicago or wherever the new city is with the new job. It's not much different than that. It's just more on an international, global scale. I'm going to do better over there at some point, and my kids will do better. And it's like that. Nobody can blame them for that. But if you're deciding whether to take that gamble, the immigrants are thinking, one reason I might not do it is I might starve on the way. I might get
Mhm.
sick on the way. I'm scared to do it. There's no hospitals around. There's no food. My kids aren't going to have diapers. I can't carry 6 months of diapers on my back. But knowing in advance that there's this safety net all the way along, I think helps them come to the decision of, I'm going to the United States and nothing too terrible is going to happen to me. I'm going to have everything I need. I'm never going to go, me or my kids will go for want of diapers or formula or something material need. And that's, I guess, the issue with the United Nations and all these NGOs doing what they're doing. Now, they would argue, and they do argue, that, well, they're fleeing terrible death, certain death, and they're going anyway, so we might as well just make sure they don't die along the way or have undue harm. And they can make that argument. There's both sides of it, but I do believe that it's worth having the debate about whether it aids and abets and actually facilitates more mass migration than would otherwise be the case. That's a debate worth having.
I absolutely agree with you. I also believe the debate should encompass, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but should encompass human trafficking and modern day slavery. Because we have effectively, by based on this kind of open borders policy, by not effectively closing the border and pushing a policy that we are about legal migration. We are not going to be opening our doors. We're going to return people home. If they come here, we're making the drug cartels and the human traffickers the middlemen in our migration policy. I mean, there is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's not like we are using these billions of dollars to legally put people on airplanes with their children, fly them in here, get them screened for medical conditions, make sure that they can come into our country and that they're not terrorists. Because I'm sure the hundreds of billions or the billions of dollars that we're spending on this could be utilized in so many different ways than just being dumped all across the board with no accountability with an open border policy. I mean, am I wrong?
Right. I mean, I don't think you're wrong. I think those are legitimate issues that ought to be discussed. I mean, look, the whole point of United States democracy, United States style democracy, is that we get to decide and have input on how our taxpayers' dollars are spent and on what. And I don't recall anybody ever asking if it's okay to send our hundreds of billions of dollars to the UN if it's for breaking our laws on the border or to facilitate mass migration that's going to cost taxpayers even further in the long run. That's a legitimate question that people have a right to ask about how our tax money is being used down there. And it disappears. It, like we've talked, you can't see. And that's the worst part of this, is that we can't really point to those debit cards directly. I mean, there is a trail, but the debit cards that I first found down in Reynosa being handed out to anybody in the line to get them, $400 every 2 weeks, $800 a month in Reynosa, Mexico. That's something that I don't think most Americans had any clue about, that was happening. And those debit cards are being handed out everywhere I've ever gone. I see those debit cards being handed out in the exact same way. There's not even any news about it, let alone some good GAO reporting or some good kind of New York Times investigative piece about where our tax dollars are going, or if we want our tax dollars to go there. Could be that the American people are perfectly happy sending hundreds of billions of dollars to help break our laws at the border. Okay, but we don't know what we don't know what we don't know about any of it, and that's the problem to my way of thinking.
So true. I mean, it is a huge problem. And what about President Obrador, what's going on in Mexico there? Because I'm assuming that he must be very happy with the billions of dollars we're spending and the millions that are probably going into debit cards, the hundreds of millions, who knows? It's like a pseudo kind of welfare state that we have created in Mexico as a way station on their way into the United States. So all that money is being recycled in Mexico. So I could see, AMLO and the Mexican government being very happy with that.
Yeah, that's a giant subject, actually. But I mean, I'll just say this, that, about those NGOs, if as long as we're on the subject, about a year ago, I was in Tapachula, Mexico, and I went to the UN area. All the immigrants, they come in over the Guatemala border. They're sent straight over to a Mexican government office to register and apply for an asylum or some kind of protection there. Once they register in the southern part of Mexico, they are sent directly next door to the UNHCR to apply for their money, for their support. So then there's these long lines of immigrants over there applying for their debit cards and their grocery bill money and their cigarette money or whatever the support is. And I found two NGOs down there that are run by the Jesuits that receive UNHCR money, and they offer psychological services. So I asked one of them, what do you mean by psychological services? And get this, what they told me was that when the immigrants get turned down from Mexican asylum because they said we're just going for a job in the United States, they are then routed for an appeal to these storefronts in Tapachula that provide psychologists who help them excavate their repressed memories of the persecution that they suffered that would get them the asylum they needed in Mexico. And I mean, that's how our money is being spent. Repressed memories, that whole shtick has been debunked as a kind of a fraudulent psychological theory from the 1980s. It's being used again all day long, all over Mexico. And I was just curious enough that I did some Google and some basic searching on NGOs in the United States that work with immigrants. And guess what they offer? Psychological services. And so I have to wonder if that's part of the whole asylum scam here too, with the psychological excavating repressed memories of the terrible persecutions that they forgot to mention, but which will actually get them the asylum that they seek.
That's very interesting because one of the issues that I've run into on the border is that people have been briefed, it appears, or been kind of coaxed and have rehearsed their story, right? Their kind of spiel. Like one kid that I ran into put pink shoelaces on his shoes. And I said, well, why do you have pink shoelaces? And he said, well, I'm gay. And I said, you're gay? And he's like, yes, I'm going to be prosecuted if I go back to my country. I go, what country? Well, if I go back to El Salvador, they'll put me in jail for being gay. This was a couple of years ago. And he said, well, that's what I was told. I was told if I say I'm gay, then I can stay in the United States. So I'm wondering if all these repressed memories are nothing more than kind of a debriefing on what you need to do to qualify for asylum.
You can count on it. That money is being spent to provide training in Mexico, large-scale seminars where they can pack hundreds in at a time. And they've got American lawyers up front on the podium explaining their rights under U.S. asylum law for when they get to the U.S. border. And I'm telling you, I have met so many way before they ever reach the border, before they've been lawyered or anything. They know what credible fear is, what a credible fear interview is, which is part of the asylum. It's the initial screening for the asylum process. And they know everything that they shouldn't say and what they should say. And they know more about our asylum process than probably any American, really. I mean, it's their job to know that, I guess, but they understand, and they will take training. And if they don't get it from American lawyers, a lot of law students from university, from like UC schools, law schools here in California, where I happen to be in California, are going down there and helping with the training and um, coaching on your rights under humanitarian law. There is nothing about that that I would ever presume is anything other than coaching on how to break through that asylum screening, that initial asylum screening that gets you in.
Allegiance Gold. Allegiance Gold will allow you to diversify your money. And especially in this day and age when everything is upside down and you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, you want to diversify. You want to protect your family. You want to protect your finances. And Allegiance Gold can actually help you protect your IRA or your 401k with physical gold and silver. It's actually tangible. Or you can have it delivered securely right to your front door. They'll educate you on the benefits of physical gold because they care and they want to build a long-term relationship with you. And right now you can get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. Again, $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. So don't wait, call or click today. That's 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, no H, SARA, or go to protectwithsara.com. Folks, we cannot control the Biden administration, but we can prepare. That's 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, or protectwithsara.com. If you want more episodes with the only voices telling the truth about the southern border, I want you to subscribe to my channel on YouTube and Rumble, and please follow me on Facebook and Twitter. It really does matter. How much do you think taxpayers are paying for this? Like, I mean, I threw out some numbers, but in your estimate, seeing what you've seen and looking at all of these different NGOs, do you have an idea, kind of a rough idea?
Well, the budget document that I wrote about for the Center for Immigration Studies, it was online. I just stumbled across it doing research for something else. And I was like, oh, whoa, wow, here's all the numbers. That was a $1.7 billion proposed budget for 2023 needs, NGO needs for migration south of the border. A lot of it having to do with Venezuelans at that time, still does. So it's definitely in the many, many hundreds of millions of dollars, for sure.
And that's both from the UN and the US, or is that just US funding separate from UN?
Well, there's US funding and there's also EU funding.
Right.
It's truly international. But one thing to keep in mind about all of these, and the NGOs at the back of that document, they're listed and how much money each one of them needs for the year. Page 221, if you have a website, I'll give you the link to the budget document, assuming it's still up. I always, when I find these things and recognize that I've got a sensitive piece here, I screenshot the heck out of it because I know it's not going to last. Right? Once I write about it, it won't be up there for long.
Right.
So if it's not up there, I've got it. Don't worry.
Magical disappearing. It's magic. It's like you write about it and all of a sudden you're going back and you don't know where it went. It went into the vortex, into the universe of the internet.
It's like
back there.
A year or two ago, I woke up one morning and my phone was pinging and beeping and bleeping and everything from friends of mine who were like, CBP just put a press release out about 2 Yemeni terrorists that they caught in California with all these details, including their pictures with like the eyes blanked out, that great when they censor the eyes.
Right.
And I was like, wait, what? They did? So I went, this is before they started acknowledging the monthly numbers of these. So I went in there and I saw it, I read it, I was like, oh my God, I've got to screenshot this right now. And sure enough, 24 hours later, it was gone. They nixed it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I just wrote about it. There's an Egyptian citizen who came in illegally, or they believe was coming in illegally. I wrote about it last week and put it on our website. Alex Carter as well wrote about it. And it was like, immediately it was kept like under wraps. No one wanted to talk about it. DHS would not contact me on it. Here is somebody who was an imminent national security threat. Imminent. That is what the BOLO says. If you see this person, they are an imminent national security threat, and they want to act like it just never happens. I know that was a lot to take in. Todd Bensman really delivers the goods. And this is what happens when you're on the ground reporting, right? When you're actually there, like Todd and I, when you are seeing people face to face, you're asking the right questions, you're witnessing what happens. This is what is so important about great journalism and about great intelligence gathering, so that our lawmakers, and by the way, we can do the right thing, right? We can do the right thing, make the right decisions. This isn't it, folks. I have another part 2 with Todd Bensman, and wait until you hear this. It is going to blow your mind. Do you ever wonder why this is happening? Why is the Biden administration? Why are they doing this? Why are they allowing people to come into the United States? That question and so much more with Todd Bensman in part 2 of this series. You do not want to miss this. This is about you. This is about your children. And this is about the future of America. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. Follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, on Twitter at Sara Carter DC, and on Instagram, where you'll see all my fast growing trees and the amazing, amazing garden that I'm building with my daughter at S Carter DC. That's on Instagram at S Carter DC. God bless you. God bless our great nation. God bless everyone who has to endure these trials and tribulations now, even those that are coming into our country illegally by these horrific, nefarious drug traffickers. And God bless the great state of Texas.